Morning everyone. Guys, am I audible? Yeah, thank you. So the last sessions we have seen how a hacker can try to collect information about their target. So we have seen how exactly details about the domain name or maybe details about their website or maybe the operating system, the application and all these things can be found. So today let us see what printing, right? So here the second step or the next step that a hacker would go through is something called scanning, right? So after a hacker identifies the details, then the second step that a hacker would go through is this scanning phase. So in scanning you have different sort of objectives. So let us see all this in detail. Scanning is always going to be an active step. So if you remember, in footprinting, we were discussing about active and passive. So what's the difference between active and passive footprinting? Because footprinting is all about collecting information, right? So passive footprinting, you are getting information through a third party. Active footprinting, you are directly connecting to the target system to find out the details. Right? Passive, right? So you will have only one step here in the scanning, and that's active connection. In short, it means whatever you are trying to do in the scanning phase, you will have a direct connection between the hacker's computer and the target. So the hacker system and the target will be connected directly here, right? So there's no such concept as active or passive scanning activity. So we'll see what else we do here. So in scanning, you also go through something called enumeration. So in enumeration, you'll find details like what is the name of that computer, what sort of user accounts are present, or maybe if there are any kind of shared files or folders within that particular network and all, right? From a network that belongs to an organization, how many systems are live? So if you recollect in the footprinting part, we saw what is the range of IP addresses, right? We saw what is the range of IP addresses that belong to an organization, right? So here, this range of IP addresses can be public IPs or they can also be private IP addresses, right? So they can be public IP addresses or they can be private IP addresses. It depends on what sort of scanning you are trying to do. If you are doing an external audit, you will be using public IP addresses for the scan. If you go with internal audit, you will be using private IP addresses for the scan. Okay. So based on whether are you performing external audit or internal audit, what sort of IP addresses you will be using in scanning will be changing there, right? So here, the first step for a hacker in the scanning phase is to identify how many of these IP addresses, right? Now let's say you have seen that the company has some 100 IP addresses. So from these 100 IP addresses, how many IP addresses are actually in use? Are they using all the 100 IP addresses, or are they only using 5 or 10 or say 20? How many are actually being used? So that's the first thing that we'll try to identify, right? To do that, you can use applications called IP scanners, right? So you use applications called IP scanners to check live IP addresses or live systems. Okay, so here you have some applications which can be used for IP scanning, something like Angry IP Scanner, Megaping, Ping Manager, or Advanced IP Scanner, right? So these are all the different tools, right? So you have hundreds of IP scanning tools. I'm giving you some examples. Now, how exactly do you think this IP scanning tools will work? So I have a range of IPs. Now let's say, uh, assuming I am performing a internal scan, I wanted to see how many IP addresses are present in this particular network, start 254. So within this particular range, which belongs to the organization, I want to see how many IP addresses are live. So any clues how we can do this? So we can try to ping these IP addresses, right? So when we try to ping this IP address, right, we'll be able to see if this particular IP address is live. So live in the sense what? Is this IP address in use or not? If it is in use, we say yes, this IP is live. If it is not in use, we say this IP is not available or this IP address is not used. Right. So these IP scanning tools will help a hacker to identify the live IP addresses in a network. So is this clear, everyone? Yeah. So let us see what sort of tools we can use here for performing this IP scan. Okay, so here in the IP scanners, as I said, there are different tools, right? So I'll be using some tools to check how exactly we can perform this IP scan activity. Now, whatever tool you are going to use, you will be getting the same information. It shows you how many IP addresses are live. So once the ending IP address that is to be scanned, so I'm giving the starting IP address 192.168.38.254. Then before I start scanning this range of IPs, I can configure the application only to show me the live IP addresses, right? Can configure the application only to show me the live IP addresses. So that, see, if I'm scanning 254 IPs, so there's no guarantee that all 254 IP addresses would be live. So in Angry IP Scanner, I say only show me the live IP addresses. Say So, uh, guys, can you hear me? Guys, am I audible? Yeah. So here, as you see, when we scan this 254 IPs live, right? It is giving you with all the list of IP addresses, whatever is available, right? And it also says on two systems it has found some open ports on 192.168.38.245. It has found port number 80 and 443, and on 192.168.38.240 it has found a port 8080. So it has found some open ports on two systems, but again this is not a full-fledged port scan, so you'll not be able to see all the available open ports, but at least you got some basic idea what open ports are available. So it is only checking for the common ports, not in detail, right? So now we got a list of available IP addresses and also the open ports, some very basic common open ports, whatever is there on that network, right? So this is how you use this application, Angry IP Scanner. The same fashion, you can also use some other application. Let's say you can use something like Advanced IP Scanner. So this application you can either application without any installations. Of the range that you have to scan to define the starting and ending IP and ending range. Guys, is audio clear? You are able to view my screen? So in advanced IP scanner, all you need to do is give the starting IP address and the ending IP address, and you can start Yeah, I'll show you the earlier screen, but can you guys view the screen now? Yeah. So this application network, right? So it shows you the list of IP addresses that you have found, and then it also gives you one additional detail. Again, remember this, guys. Is audio clear? Guys, is the audio and video clear now? You're all able to view my screen, right? Okay. So let's see. So this application, advanced IP scanner, right? So this shows you what all live IP addresses are available in our network. And then it is also giving you some additional detail about what is the MAC address of the system that is identified. Right. So it is checking for what all IP addresses are available. And then it is also checking for what it is a internal audit. Right. On external audit, you will not be able to see the MAC addresses. Right. On external audit, you cannot see the MAC addresses. It is only possible for internal audit. Okay. Okay. So is this one clear? How is this advanced IP scanner useful? Yeah. And as you are asking for the earlier application, which is Angry IP scanner, So same as IP address. So you start with 192.168.38.1 as the starting IP, and 38.254 is the ending IP address. And then in the options, we say only display the alive host. Do not display all the hosts, right? Don't show all the IP addresses. Only display the alive host. Say OK and start. IP addresses are found to be live, and on some IP addresses, it is also finding some open port, right? But again, not all open port, right? It only shows you with some common ports there. Okay, so is that clear, guys? How we are using this Angry IP scanner? Okay, so is the audio and video not proper? Okay, so is the audio clear now? Can I explain this application? Yeah. So in this Angry IP scanner or advanced IP scanner that we used earlier, right? So whatever IP scanning tool that we use, right? We have to give what is the starting IP address and what is the ending IP address of that particular range. So when you're trying to scan a range of IP addresses, we define what is the first IP of the range and what is the last IP address of the range. Now, these applications, your IP scanning tools, they try to ping all those IP addresses, whatever live, right? So it shows you how many of these IP addresses are live, and they give you a list of all those IP addresses which are found to be live. Okay, so that's how an IP address scanner will work. Okay, is that clear? Okay, so we'll see if the network gets better. So far, are you guys clear with this IP address scanning tool? Guys, so far, are you clear with this IP scanning tool? How does it function? Okay, so once a hacker is done with addresses in the network, then the next step for a hacker is to identify running. So the next step for a hacker is to identify this running services, like to identify what all services are available in on these IP addresses. So now let's say out of some 100 IP addresses in the range, let's say a hacker has found some 26 IP addresses are live. Now on these 26 IP addresses, hacker has to see what all services are running there. What the scanning. So hacker has to identify the running services. Now, to identify running services, like say for example, hacker has to check if some services like say SSH or Telnet or maybe say HTTP or HTTPS or FTP. So what kind of services are running on the remote machine? Right. So to identify this, to identify what all services are running on the remote machine, a hacker can use some applications called port scanners. So similar to how we were using something called IP scanners, right? To identify the live IP addresses. To identify running services on the target system, a hacker has to use something called port scanners, right? So here when you speak about port scanners, as the name says, these applications are trying to scan for. Now, what is an open port? What is a port actually? What is a port, guys? Am I audible? Yeah. So here when we speak about ports, so what is this port? So are we speaking about the physical ports on a computer or the logical ports? So here we are not speaking about the physical ports like our Ethernet, logical ports, right? So whenever you speak about any service, now let's say for example, I take up HTTP service. Now we know using HTTP service, we can host a website or a web application can be hosted using this particular HTTP service, right? Now, right, uh, user can be anywhere, maybe a local network user or maybe somewhere on internet, right? Anywhere. So if a user wants to access this HTTP service, the website or the web application, whatever is running on our server, This user has to send the request through a port. So every service users. So a port is like a entry point or an exit point for your communication. So any sort of communication has to pass through a port, right? So how many ports do we have? So when you speak about your operating system, how many ports does it support? Okay, so it supports 65 535, but actually it is 65 536 including port 0, right? So these are the number of ports that are supported by your operating system. Now this is irrespective of your operating system, be it Windows, Linux, Mac, Android, iOS. Every operating system has to support all these ports, right? So a hacker is trying to see from these ports how many are open. Right. Now let's say for example on a system I see port 80 is open. Now we know that port 80 means HTTP. Or if say I see port number 21 is open. Now we know port 21 is FTP. So by looking at the open port on the server or on the system, we can identify the relevant service, what service is configured on that system. Okay, so we see what is the open port. The open port tells us what is the service that is running there. Okay, so if a hacker has to identify the running services, hacker has to check the open ports there. Is it clear? Why hackers are trying to perform this port scan? Okay, so let us see some applications which perform a port scan, right? So Angry IP scanner or advanced IP scanner, right? These are only for identifying the live IPs. Now to perform port scan, we use different tools. Now let's say I can use something like advanced port scanner, a free software. You know, you don't need any license, right? What would be the range of IPs of the range? Define the starting and the ending IP address of the range. Uh, so you are not able to hear what I'm explaining when the tool is running. Okay. So what we are doing in this application, advanced port scanner, is we give the detail about the range, what is the first IP address and what is the last IP, right? We say start scanning. The application will scan for the entire range of IP addresses, whatever we have defined, and it finds out what all IP addresses are live in the network. And once it finds what all IP addresses are live, then it would find all the open ports on that particular system and show you the details. So here, as you can see, 135, 139, 443, 445. So these are all different open ports that are present on the remote system, right? So it is telling you how many open ports are present on the remote system, right? Based on the given IP address. So it is trying to check for all the IP addresses in the given range. So whatever open ports are found on each of those IP addresses, it will show us the details here. Okay, is it clear how actually this port scan? Guys, are you clear? How is this port scanning tool working? Yeah. So here, when we speak about this port scanning tool, right? Even though it is showing us like what all open ports are present and all, right? There's a limitation. Right? So when you speak about a port, right? Ports can be configured to accept TCP or UDP communications, right? So whatever the port you are trying to use, right? Port 80 or port 443, right? Or 53 and all this, right? So this particular ports can be configured to use either TCP based communication or UDP based communication. Guys, is the audio clear? Are you guys able to hear me? Okay. So here, as I said, when you speak about ports, these ports can accept two different type of communication. One is TCP and the other is UDP, right? And here, when you are looking for open ports using a port scanner, like whatever port scanners we have used, right? Right. So this scanning tools, they show you open ports based on TCP communication, right? So this port scanning tools, they show you open ports based on TCP communication, right? They do not show you ports based on UDP communication, right? So this port scanning tools like SuperScan or advanced port scanner that you use, they do not TCP communication, right? So if you also want to see open ports based on UDP communication, then these are not the proper tools. You'll have to use a different application, right? So is it clear, guys? So whatever the these applications will only show you TCP based open ports. They do not show you UDP based open ports. Okay, is it clear so far, everyone? Guys, are you clear so far? Not clear.